Hey everybody, so I'm going to show you a different kind of technique I've been doing. I'm going to call it shadowing the light. I'm using this ring here to shadow the upper lights that are going, and only using the two lights here, and that's it. And this is just blocking some of the light. You could see here that the handle's kind of blocking some of the light here. But if we amplify this a little, we get a full image there. Kind of have to hold the phone in a weird way. If I come down here, it shadows. This is 14 hertz and 100 and I believe this is 110 millimeter pad. Not sure what's the angle of this. If I hold it back here and zoom in. So one light, if I turn that down, it just looks like that. That's the microscope light that has 3 different ring lights in it. But you always need the filler light that fills all the main pattern. And then the line work sits on top. Change this to 15 hertz. Kind of a weird back and forth frequency. Sometimes this will turn into a triangle if you get the right amount of fluid in there and the right size containment. That's why I don't really keep track of these numbers, because if I were to put these frequencies into a different kind of container, it would act differently. Relatively speaking, it would have somewhat of the same pattern. It's just would act differently, and so they will overlap differently. And the key is that you're controlling everything with this low volume here. You're only amplifying a tiny, tiny bit. And you want your lights pretty. You could see that the shadow is covering up a little bit more on the red. Adjusting it's kind of hard because I don't have the right kind of clamp there. But you see just a tiny bit of adjustment, I can cover up that red more evenly. You could see the ring light, the center 60 millimeter ring light here is shining through pretty good. I got the center point fairly good. It's a tiny, tiny bit off. You could see that there's this black line here and it's more filled here. But sometimes that's just the way the wave of the water is bending. So when we amplify this, turn it up with the low volume knob. Now the problem with taking pictures is that you'll see the frames per second. Can't really see it in the video too much. You can't see it when you're looking at it with your eyes. It will take pictures and you'll only get half of the light. That's why you take so many pictures, because this looks great right here, but if you try taking pictures, you'll be missing a section here. You can see all this flickering. All that flickering will look like dead space when you take a photo real fast. So this is 16 hertz. Here's 17. And you want it to just ring out. I'm not doing anything yet. It's going to go too loud probably. When it starts to get too loud, you'll see the center start to get too scrambled. Everything kind of looks a little bit more jaggedy, and then it'll start to spread out. See these 3 circles? So you got too much amplification. So you turn that down. And the key is to control not just the volume here, but the amount of light going into the camera. So people have my kits, the L.I.F.E viewers, and some people have the same camera as I do. On these cameras, on the lens here, this is your lighting control, the center one, and turning that down mostly, and then getting the sharpness adjusted with the fine sharpness up here on the top one. This is your zoom, and this is the light, and then this is your focus. So the key is to get the right amount of light in there by turning down that center one right here. That's turning it up, and you can see how much thicker everything looks. This is turning it down, and look how much more detail I'm already getting in some of the imagery just by turning that light down. So when I amplify it, now I don't have to amplify it too much, which allows me to get the pattern I want from the frequency. Right around here is where you leave it for a little bit, and then kind of turn it down and work with it a little. Now it's going to get too loud again. So that's always the issue. There are techniques like I've been learning by amplifying it real quickly and then turning it down. Doesn't work so good in these larger pans. Works way better in a smaller pan, where you can amplify it real fast with the bass knob and then take your picture real quickly, and it'll get a crisp looking image real fast, almost like a strobe. Here's 18 hertz. And I'll take off the center part and show you what it does. You can see that some frequencies are always going to do this. How it works is most are going to start a divide, and then you're going to have a 4-sided thing that kind of divides into the little cross pattern. See that? And then the next one will be more like a Cymatics pattern that everybody is kind of used to seeing, like the little stars and suns and things like that. So it keeps repeating itself over and over to where you get a 5 or 6 or 8, you know, all the numbers you know, sighted, gotten them all. And then we turn the frequency and they'll start to divide again to the half one. It divides in half. Go up one more frequency, it'll do like a 4 or a pulse sometimes, or it just pulses, which is still the same thing. There's the 4. We'll go up another frequency. You'll see that it'll go back to probably a triangle or a divided. Nope, this one's going to go to, you could see that it's starting to fractal out and stretch itself. It's still too loud. If I turn this down, I can kind of adjust that. As you turn it down, you're adding more light to the, see how much more light goes there? So you can adjust that by turning down the light in the lens instead of turning down the light like this. So you always want this light kind of full blast, and then you do your adjustments. So we go up to another frequency, 24 hertz. We're kind of in too big of a pan for these frequencies, kind of. They'll shift a lot more. See how it divided in half right there? You can see that right there in the center. And then I switch it up another frequency, and it'll probably go to 4. Oh, this one is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So 8 and 4. Go up another frequency to 26 hertz. Should be doing this in lower frequencies. It'll probably show better in this pan. So each one of my lights will do different things and add different effects depending on how I use them and how I use the filters or not the filters. You could see that most everything kind of has filters on them because that's better for shadowing more of the dimension look. If I switch this down to, let's go down to 10 hertz here. You see the light is off a little bit right there. You kind of do want to, it's just a tiny movement of the tripod to straighten that out. And you really do want it super perfect like that. And you can see the shadow covering up the LED up there. Different size pans is going to allow a different amount of that light to go in there. And depending how I adjust that light too, by turning down the red or the blue or the green itself. So lower frequencies, like this is 10 hertz. It's going to take a little bit, and here's that pulsing thing. Sometimes if you keep adjusting the volume, it'll eventually, if you get that pulse perfect, it'll turn into a star. Go to 11 hertz. So 11 hertz is that divide that turns into a triangle pattern. Point is that you want to really try to get in between the first level that it's going and the second. So like turning it up and then turning it down and finding this spot right here. That's where you mainly want to do that. If I turn off just this light and leave on just the white light by itself and the upper light, It's kind of doing, the upper light is shading the orange. The 60mm light is the pattern that you see. Just amplifying it a tiny bit and trying to find that perfect spot. A lot of these triangle things will want to shift into 4 patterns after being a triangle for a little bit. 12 hertz. It's going to be, you can see that's too amplified. So you want to turn that back down. And then kind of adjust it a tiny bit right there. So it's going to get too loud. So if I take this off now, it allows more light to go into the lens. And the camera I'm using right now, I have it set on a high contrast, high sharpness. When you switch it to a middle contrast, you'll get more lighting in here. This will look more shaded. But I always just like to use the adjustment up here on the lens, and I'll show you. Well, let me get a pattern real fast. Let's go to 13 hertz here. When you're working in these larger pans, everything kind of moves around a lot. And I'll show you how changing the size of the pan makes a pretty big difference. So like we're here, and I'm going to turn this down. Alright, so you could see that that's like a 4-sided pattern. Put the little pen on here. Some of these just go right on, and other ones are tricky to get it to screw on properly. So we want about that much. Make sure you get the edges all wet so you get an even pattern. Alright, let's amplify this a little. And all we're doing is amplifying the same frequency in a smaller containment. And you can see I'm not going to get that frequency to work because it's too low and too small of a containment. So the little container, if you want it to work, you got to go a little bit higher frequency. Probably maybe around 14 hertz might even work. Let's see, it'll bounce around if it won't. It wants to work, so it's just a little bit amplified, way too much. So turn it down and try to control it. This is where I was talking about where you can kind of amplify it and then turn it down real fast. You want to take your pictures probably around somewhere in that zone. And go up to 15 hertz again. Okay, this one's dividing itself in half. It's really amplifying a lot. I got the water too deep. Sometimes if the fluid is too deep, it'll do that. It'll move around a lot on you. So taking some of the fluid out will help. Alright, so the same thing. It's going to divide in half again. We even turn it. It's up to 17 hertz now. This is when it pulses. See, it's very amplified right now. You can see that still, this containment is still a little bit too small because it's still dividing itself. All the way up to 8, we're at 18 hertz now. This one should make a pattern. So you can see how quickly the pattern comes and goes. To stabilize it takes a little bit of time, leaving things like this for a little bit. And tiny little amplification at a time till you see that. And you kind of just want to leave it and take your pictures somewhere in these zones right here. You can see it's going to get too amplified. So to me, you know, this pan is still too small for even these lower frequencies. This is 19 hertz. Still doing the same thing, dividing in half and amplifying itself. Let's go up to 20. 20 is doing the same thing. You can see that these smaller containments are meant for higher frequencies, over usually about 30 hertz. And I feel like we might have filled it up just a tad too much. Things tend to work a little bit differently every time you take some of the fluid out. You don't have to take very much of the fluid out. See how I took the fluid out and now I get a pattern? And then there it goes. So we'll go back up to 28 hertz now. It's much more stabilized in this containment. You can see when I turn down this light, and that's just the other light all by itself up above, acting as a filtered background. So that's just this light all by itself. And then you see the little yellow light in there. That's the car accent light that's on a dimmer. And as you add that, you start to get the pattern. And if you amplify it too much, it'll start to, you know, show different patterns of itself. And if I wanted to see more of this, I had to turn up the lens light. See that? It didn't do anything. I just adjusted the light and coming into the lens. If you do it right, you can mess with that frames per second there. You see that frames per second going and flashing? That's where it messes up your imagery. So I'll turn this down just a tiny bit more. Right around here is going to be my best images if I, man, I just knocked my light. You can see I knocked my light, but the image is still pretty perfect. There'll be little imperfections within there. You can see this is a very small container. If I adjust some of the light on my phone, I can get that frames per second to kind of go away a little bit. Not very much though. So you can see that the smaller containment's a little bit more detailed in imagery. This is just 2 lights. I use up to like 8 lights. So you see this is a frequency that will move around a lot. So if I want to take some pictures, sometimes I'll just do this. I'll ring this out to about here. Well, right around here. Then I'm going to amplify it, take a picture. Amplify it, take a picture. Amplify it, take a picture. So I'm taking pictures in between this amplification and turning it down, so I can get rid of that frames per second thing that happens. You keep doing it, you're going to notice that the water's going to start acting funny. This is 30 hertz. 30 hertz wants to divide itself in this one. Sometimes 30 hertz is a perfectly symmetrical like sun pattern. Same thing with the next one. It's going to start showing how this stuff divides, then goes into a 4 pattern and an 8 pattern and all that kind of stuff. So basically, if you were to take a picture of this right here, this would actually show you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So this is when it takes pictures, going to shift to 4s. It's going to take a picture with these 2 and then these 2. And then sometimes it'll get all 8. So it's kind of weird. So up to 33 hertz here. 34. You see how that turns into a 5 pattern. Now if I wanted to add some of the red or the green or the blue to add to my lighting, I can. I can even turn these all the way up and then turn this all the way down and then adjust from here. Blue light's never really good unless you use it as an accent. So if I plug in my other light, which is looks like another 6 or 7 inch light here. That one will flash blue. So that one sits right here on this 10-inch light that's not on. And now you can see the blue popping in and out. So when I take pictures, you'll get some blue in there and some other colors. If I turn this one down and I add some blue to it, and a tiny bit of red, and then we get a little bit of color variation there now. If I turn up my other light really bright, and then I go ahead and adjust the camera again, or I'm going to adjust the lighting and the lens down. Now I get a little more detail in all the lighting itself. You can see how this is kind of sticking out more above and then the darker pattern below is because of how the lighting is being adjusted in the camera and how much I amplify the pattern itself. The more I amplify it, the darker this gets, and then the more I have to turn up in the camera itself. If I turn this down and it get really bright like that, then I have to turn the lighting in the camera down so I can see more detail. The more light and the closer the light, the more thicker that light's gonna look. This is why my light sits so high above everything, is because the more you could stretch out your light, the thinner the lines you can get and the more details you're gonna get inside that imagery. So let's go 37. I could see that the camera's a little bit out of focus there. Actually, it's my camera, my phone. There we go. 38. It's getting to be too long a video. 39. No, I gotta go eat dinner right now, so I'm gonna turn this off. Alright, so that's kind of how I do all that. This is all the stuff sitting in the speaker.